Well, hello everyone. I'm Naveen Agarwal and I'm so excited to welcome you again to our weekly live discussion. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me welcome you specially. And those of you who are returning, thank you again. Now, this is supposed to be a very informal and casual conversation. This is not a webinar or a lecture. Our whole purpose of connecting every week live on both LinkedIn and YouTube is to have a dialogue, a conversation. So I invite you to share anytime in the chat your comments, your questions, your opinions. Because what we want to talk about are day-to-day practical challenges in the practice of implementing a risk management process for our medical device. Now, I've said this before, I have done this for many years. And I think that the actual practice of risk management, doing it well, doing it efficiently, doing it effectively in the medical device industry is quite challenging. So that's our whole point. Keep in mind that this is a public forum. So do not share any information that is proprietary to your business or sensitive to your business. The other request is to stay professional at all times, especially if you disagree with any of the comments or the discussion going on. And finally, nothing that we discuss in this live session should be taken as regulatory advice, either for the purpose of compliance or for the purpose of regulatory submissions. We are here just to have a conversation, share common problems and challenges, and share best practices, because I know all of you have tried to figure out ways to solve daily problems, and we would like to hear your best practices as well. So that's the whole purpose of these sessions. And as I said before, anytime, share in the comments below in the chat, and I will be keeping an eye on that on my monitor and address that as soon as I possibly can, so that we can have a rich dialogue. And we'll be here for about 30 minutes, and I'll set the stage with a few slides. Again, opening slides, not a big presentation. Today, we're going to be continuing our conversation around analysis of post-market safety surveillance data. We have talked about data sources. We have talked about some methods of analysis using trending. We're going to continue our conversation. This is a very important topic and very critical topic for our medical device industry, because post-market is actually a very big part of the life cycle of our medical devices. And we spend a lot of effort and resources collecting data, analyzing data, and taking actions. So we'll continue our conversation today with a focus on signal detection and comparing and contrasting it to trending. Both are important. It's not either or. Both are important. We just need to understand what is the context. Now, let me just summarize for you our key points in our last discussion about methods of analysis. We talked about trending a lot. And to me, whether you use trending or any other analytical method in your post-market surveillance process, it needs to effectively answer three questions. The first one is there anything new? Are we uncovering or learning anything new? And that could be a new harm, a new hazard, a new way our device is failing, a new use error or a misuse, a new regulation, or change in the state of art. Is there anything new? That's number one. Second question, is there a change? Can we detect a change in what we have been monitoring over certain period of time? And the third question to ask, should we act? Now, these are the big picture questions that I think we should keep in mind as we talk about post-market safety surveillance, right? So that is the whole point. And again, in the chat, please share anytime whatever comes to your mind. Let me just see what we have here. Okay, so whatever comes to your mind in terms of your comments, questions, challenges, points of frustration, confusion, that's the whole point of this discussion. So three key questions to answer. Is there anything new? Has something changed? Should we act? With this context, let me share with you only a few slides about this whole topic of signals. It is a very important topic. So let's look into a few slides. Signal or trend. And here is a nice graphic that I like to look at and remind ourselves that we are flooded with data. It's coming at us from many different directions. How we detect that signal, which is the red fish here? Do we have the capability, analytical tools available to us to detect a single signal? Why? Because most of the time we are doing trending. We collect data, we plot it on a chart, we do it over a period of time, and we monitor for some trends. Now that is important. But as we discussed last week, trending is not particularly suitable for signal detection. So we're going to talk a lot more about signal detection. I'm going to share with you actually a case study to illustrate this key point. So let's go back to the dictionary. What is the difference? A signal is something such as a sound, gesture, or object that conveys notice or warning, is distinguished from the ordinary and notable. This is how signal is defined. What's a trend? Trend is a general movement over time of a statistically detectable change, a line of general direction or movement. So trend happens over a period of time. Signal could happen at any time. That's a big difference. So why does it matter? It matters because we have to answer at the end of the day a very key question. Should we act based on what we are seeing in our data? Should we act? And when? How much time is available to us? So why does it matter? I live in Florida and we are very aware of hurricanes. In fact, our hurricane season is going to start very soon. The signal is, as soon as we detect a change, a satellite image, maybe off the coast of Africa, it's headed our way. But we don't know if it's going to come and hit us where we are and how long do we have. So we monitor it and we look at its trajectory and we predict almost on an hourly basis or on a daily basis where it will go. There's a lot of uncertainty in the beginning, but it gets closer, we get a lot more confidence. So it is detecting the signal and monitoring it at the same time and refreshing our models and predictions to be able to make a decision. On the other hand, I've also lived in the Midwest where the risk of tornadoes is very high. And I still remember during one Christmas break where we didn't have enough time. It was just a sound alarm, a siren going on, and the tornado actually touched down within a few miles of where we lived. Great devastation. You may not have time to trend or monitor and then take action. So it depends. We need to be capable of doing both well and with the right sense of urgency and at the right time frame. We need to be able to do both. So now let's look at a case study, why it became important, and I'll put that into context for you. In the meantime, please share your questions and comments in the chat. So we are coming out of COVID, thankfully. Things are settling down a little bit. But in the early days, we heard about this, where there was a risk of severe, very rare, but a severe situation following the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine. Some people were presenting themselves with signs of blood clots in the brain, which is CVST. But the unique thing about this situation was that it was happening when their platelet counts was low. So medically, this was CVST with thrombocytopenia. Thrombocytopenia basically means that platelet counts are low. Now, look at the information that on a timeline. This is what we would do on a trending chart, right? This is from a meeting presentation from the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices by the CDC. April 14th they met. February 27th, emergency use authorization of the vaccine. Interim ACIP recommendation was February 28th, which is what allowed the public to start receiving this vaccine. March 2nd, the vaccination started. And in this time period, March 19th to April 12th, there were 6. Let me repeat, only 6 out of millions of vaccines delivered, only 6 cases of CVST. It was serious enough, and I'll show you the analysis that they did, that the CDC and FDA recommend a pause on the Janssen vaccine, and the investigation continued. This is a signal. So they acted. What prompted the action? Imagine if we were doing just trending and monitoring. Now we have a question here from Christopher Chan. Will the slide be available for download? It'll be available in the video. So there'll be a video recording and you'll be able to see this information in the slides. I do not present the slide presentations separately because slides are just an opening presentation. All the information will be available in the video as a recording, and you can watch that many times. So it was a signal, but imagine if we were doing trending and monitoring in a routine way where we were taking the number of events, in this case CVST with thrombocytopenia, dividing that by the number of vaccines delivered, which are millions. Our signal will be this weak. Would we be able to differentiate that signal from any other noise? And would we take the right steps with the right sense of urgency? That's the whole point of this conversation. So how did they analyze this data? They did not do a control chart. They did not do sophisticated trend analysis, but there are methods available. We are just not using them in our medical device industry. I want to bring this to your attention. And I have used them in the past very successfully. So signal detection and understanding of the signal is very important. So this is what they did. Now we have another comment here. What is the preferred approach to feedback post-market surveillance data back into risk assessment? So please hold on to that question. I'll discuss that in just a minute. Let me finish the signal detection case study. This is what they did. They had background information on the estimated annual rate of occurrence of CVST, which is, again, I'm a non-medical person, okay? So this is kind of very complicated terminology for me, but I take time to understand and learn that. And also I have worked with doctors many times. But simply speaking, CVST is just a clot in your brain. In the venous system, in the brain, you have a lot of veins and a clot can form. In this case, the background rates were 0.5 to 2 per 100,000 of the population. We have given millions of vaccines, right? Now this was limited only to women of a certain age, about 20 to 50 years. And the risk period they had to adjust for calendar days. They had 1.4 million doses administered. So what they did was they estimated an expected rate of occurrence, expected number of cases. So if you just make a table, 0.5 to 2, they would estimate in the risk period about 0.39 for 0.5 per 100K to 1.6 in this particular time frame. That's what they would estimate. What they were observing, they observed 6, right? So if you use that count of 6, you can calculate something called a reporting ratio. It's very easy to do, very simple formula. That reporting ratio indicated a range of about 4 to 15 compared to the background rate. This is why this signal was important. And that's the analytical method that they used. It's very, very simple. The statistics side is not very difficult. What is more difficult is understanding what the signal means, confirming the signal, and taking the right action very, very quickly. So to complete the story, what did they end up doing? They did not pull the vaccine from the market. They issued a warning. Why was that warning important? Because this was a very unique situation. You cannot use the same treatment that you would if a patient presented themselves with a condition of a blood clot if you did not know this particular scenario. They had low platelet counts, so you cannot do heparin. So doctors had to make the right decision. Pulling the vaccine off the market would actually cause more damage because we would have much limited supply and the rate at which it is happening is still pretty low. However, it's a very important signal. So benefit risk, this is a great example of benefit risk based decision making. So I hope this example helps us understand why it is important for us to have a method in place to figure out if we have a signal, if there is anything new, and then should we act. Trending and monitoring is a good tool. And as we discussed last time, it is very, very useful for a mature, stable product. But it is not useful for, let's say, a brand new product. You're going into the market for the first time. But I would love to hear from you, your thoughts on whether you do signal monitoring, signal detection in your process and what tools you use, what has worked for you, what has not worked for you. And if you don't, what are some of the limitations that you have seen with trending and monitoring methods that you are using? I would love to hear from you. Okay, so let me go back to this question that was asked. What is the preferred approach to feedback post-market surveillance data back into risk assessment? Now, this actually is a very, very good question because this is where we struggle. And what I like to tell people is that you have to create a post-market surveillance process, and on top of it, you have to create a business process. You should treat the post-market surveillance process as a business process, because at the end of the day, the actions you take and when you take is important, and you have to separate signal from noise. So having a business process in place is important. Now, part of that business process will include forming, let's say, a cross-functional team that will evaluate these signals, and that should include your engineers, your manufacturing folks, your potentially even your suppliers if they're critical. And maybe I'm saying things which are probably not very intuitive or not very easy to implement, but I want to talk about the concept, because it can be done. It can be done with the right system in place, and it should include medical and clinical professionals. Based on that, you need to make a decision what you do. Your first decision should relate to any action in the marketplace, any notification to the regulatory authorities as required, any health advisory notices, any recalls, if that is warranted. You cannot stop there. You have to figure out how to feed it back into your entire design and development process, for example, either to have a fix in place for this particular issue for that product, or use that as information for future products. Similarly, you could potentially utilize your CAPA process. Now, you might sense that I'm hesitating a little bit because CAPA is not very effectively implemented, in my opinion. We have a lot of problems with our CAPA system, and we should not rely entirely on the CAPA system or the CAPA process to deal with these type of scenarios. We need to act much faster, much faster. So we might have to create something different, but you could use, if you wanted to, you could use your CAPA process to do an investigation first. Don't jump to action. Use an investigation. So that is what my experience has been, is to determine these actions based on a business process on top of our post-market safety surveillance process, which is typically governed by a procedure. So in my experience, that seems to have worked well. But thank you for asking that question. I hope it provided you with some useful information and tips on how to actually practice this. It might take you a little while to get going, to set this up. I mean, I always say the resources are limited. Everyone is busy. But you have to figure out and give it the right priority in your organization. And until you establish a business process, you will not get the right business priority on this. So you have to involve your stakeholders, get their buy-in, get their commitment, and do the due diligence, and show over time that you are not wasting the organization's resources, that you are actually helping us make, or helping the organization make, good decisions at the right time. That's what it all matters. And believe me, it can be done because I have done it in my past experience. So thank you for sharing that with me. So again, please continue to share your comments and questions here. We are talking about topics which are beyond compliance or non-compliance. And in these weekly discussions, that is not our focus. We are going to be informed by what the regulatory requirements are, but we're going to be focused on what the challenges are in daily practice. So our focus is on practical challenges, practical problems, practical points of confusion, and sources of frustration. That is what we are going to be talking about week after week. And I would love to hear from you. And today we are talking about post-market surveillance, signals, and trending. But is there any other topic or question that you want to discuss in these live sessions? Share that with me in these comments here, or connect with me on LinkedIn if you feel more comfortable connecting with me directly and engaging that way. That's also perfectly fine. But I believe that collectively our community has a lot of experience, not only facing these problems on a daily basis, but also solving them. We have best practices, and what I would like to see happen is more communication and collaboration among our industry peers, and that is why I want to do this week after week. So I look forward to hearing from you. Please share as much as possible in these comments below. So I want to visit with you particularly this discussion around signals, why it is important, probably even more important, for a new product you're about to launch. Even though even though that new product may be 80 to 90% same from a technological point of view. You might say, I already have a post-market surveillance process in place. I'm just going to launch it and put it into the same pipeline. Why should I do anything different? I think you should take a step back and ask the question, in what way that 10%, which I talked about, 80 to 90% may be technologically the same, but there's a reason why you're launching a new product. It does something slightly different. It is more innovative than your last generation product, right? It does something different. Maybe it has a different intended use. Maybe you are taking to a new geographical location or a new market, you are expanding. Maybe the package size is different. I would not discount, I'm an engineer, by the way. To me, it might seem like you have repackaged it. Maybe instead of 5 boxes in a package, you have 10. Might seem like a trivial change, but you need to take a step back and evaluate that from a user's perspective. Put yourself in the shoes of the user. So in that context, keeping an eye on the signals is very important. So do you have a system in place to monitor, to kind of babysit this new product for a little while? That's what we're going to talk about. Okay, so we have a comment from Taylor, a question. Do you have additional insight in regards to trending of complaint failure modes versus adverse events versus hazardous situation experienced by the user? Okay, Taylor. So you are really hitting on a pretty important point here. As engineers, product developers, we focus a lot on failure modes. Unfortunately, in our industry, despite a lot of data being available, we do not yet have a conclusive, clear linkage in most cases. In some cases we do, but in most cases, we do not have a clear linkage between the device failures and how a patient gets harmed. We may be doing trending and monitoring of, let's say, malfunctions. And keep in mind, they are alleged malfunctions. In many cases, we don't even have the product back to confirm that malfunction. So they're alleged malfunctions. So we might be doing trending and monitoring of that. We might be doing trending and monitoring of adverse events reported to us. And we might be trying to figure out what are the hazardous situations and how do we get information about that. But they are all done differently. How do we connect the whole story? How do we connect the picture? So first off, let's not try to overfit the model. And this is a common problem in our analytical world where we try to overfit something because we want to do analytical approach. Yeah, fine. But I always say qualitative analysis is also important. Building a story is also important. Talk to your experts. Do not discount expert judgment. And when you have information, let's say malfunctions, but there's a signal, there's a new kind of a malfunction. Take a step back and consider what could also happen. So talk to your experts. Collect as much information as possible from the actual use scenario. So it might take a little bit more work for you to build this story together, but try to achieve that and that'll help you. And so I know I'm probably not able to answer this question directly because we do not have very clear linkage in most cases. In some cases we might, and in those cases you might have to go back and put some additional controls. You may have to update your FMEAs or FTAs or any other risk analysis you're doing, put some new controls. But in most cases, my experience has been that we cannot draw a straight line from a device failure to a harm. There's a lot of discussion that needs to happen in the middle. I hope that makes sense, but please share again in the comments if you would like to discuss more. Now, Manish, you have a question about or a comment about would like to learn about design controls. Great. Thank you for sharing that with me. Manish, what I will tell you is that design control is a big topic. So it'll be super useful because remember, we are not here in a classroom. This is not a lecture or a webinar. It will be super helpful if you could share a specific question or a specific challenge that you are facing in design control, and we'll take that on. We'll talk about it not only from a regulatory point of view, but also from a practical point of view. That's our whole purpose. Shalu, thank you for sharing this with. You have a comment here. One of the approach can be feeding back the complaint rate and see the correlation between the probabilities of harm related to clinical use. Okay, so yes, you could do a lot of sophisticated mathematical analysis if you have good data. Statistical analysis can help you make inferences or conclusions, develop a predictive model. We can do that. Absolutely, we can do that. The question you should ask is, what is the quality and reliability of my incoming data? How well can I use this? Now, I have done statistics for many, many years in my careers, and I always tell people, statistics cannot give you the answer if you don't know what question you are trying to ask. And you need, every statistical analysis requires some assumptions. You need to go back and look at the assumptions, understand the limitations of your analysis before you can drive any conclusions. So I try to tell people that do the statistical analysis the best way you can, but understand the limitations and do not let it over-index or over-influence your judgment or decision making. That's why I talk about the business process on top of the safety surveillance process. But Shalu, you are right. If you have good quality data that you have actually somehow tested, you should be able to test the quality of your data. If you have good quality data, it's complete, you can build very good models and try to predict from the rate of failure what the rate of harm could be in that particular scenario. Yes, you could do that. My experience has been otherwise, that it has not been possible. We have a lot of information, but we have not been able to build these models. But I would love to hear from you. If you have experience in that area, please share. And maybe we will do a joint session. Maybe we share that. If you are able to share with other folks in the community, we could certainly entertain that idea. But yes, in principle, that can be done. Okay, so we are running out of time. So we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Continue to have a conversation here on this topic. We will have more presentations or more discussions in future if this is of interest to you. But please let me know what will be of use and value to you. So let me summarize what we talked about today. What we talked about today is the importance of understanding the value of signal detection and taking timely action. And in many cases, we may not have the luxury to wait for a trend to emerge. That's why trending and monitoring has limitations. It is not completely without use, right? It's not a useless tool. It is a very useful tool, especially for a mature, stable product in the marketplace. You can use that. But for a new product or some new scenario, it has limitations. That is where signal monitoring and signal identification or detection becomes important. I shared with you a case study which uses reporting ratio. That is the analytical method. Very easy, not very difficult at all, because it compares what you're observing with what an expected baseline rate should be. It's a very powerful tool for signal detection. There are other tools as well. Highly sophisticated tools are also available. But let's not get paralyzed by all these sophisticated analytical methods. Keep the big picture in mind. Both signal detection and trending and monitoring are important, because at the end of the day, it should allow you to take the right decision at the right time. We have another comment from Shalu, very, very good here. Another use of PMS data on different user populations. This can help you determine if your risk assessment needs to split by patient population. Yes, and where you are going with that, Shalu, I think is you are saying different patient populations may present different risk factors or different factors that may be relevant for you to understand the sequence of events and hazardous situation, what a potential outcome for them could be. Not only that, I think understanding by different patient populations, you can probably segment your benefit risk, and you can see which patient population has the highest benefit to risk balance, right? You could do that. You could also understand how your healthcare professionals, let's say surgeons or doctors, are interfacing with these different patient populations. So you can have that level of segmentation, and that is where the power of post-market surveillance can actually be used in your risk analysis. It's an ongoing process of improvement. So Shalu, thank you for sharing that thought with us. Certainly very relevant. And that's why you should talk to your medical professionals and ask them, how is what I'm doing relevant for, let's say, this patient demographic, especially if that patient demographic happens to be part of your intended use for the new product. Let's say you are expanding and you are trying to figure out how it will affect that population. So we are at the end of the time, unfortunately, for our session today. Continue to share your thoughts, engage with me on LinkedIn, and let me know what's in your mind. Finally, I want to let you know that I will be going on vacation for about a month. So you will not have any of these live discussions in the coming weeks. But as soon as I come back, I will be resuming this series, and I will not be able to respond to your comments while I'm gone, because the decision I have made this year is to disconnect completely and really focus on a few other things that we should be focusing on, or I should be focusing on. Disconnect for a while and come back rejuvenated. But I love doing this, and I love looking forward to connecting with you each week and listening to your feedback and suggestions. So enjoy your summer, everyone. I'll connect with you when I come back.